Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about nightmare rookie landing spots for Dynasty Fantasy Football. We saw it last year. Zach Charbonnet went to the Seahawks. Jackson Smith-Njigba went to the Seahawks. And Dynasty managers were not happy. So Joe and I will be talking about the top 10 that have us a little bit concerned.
Hike!
All right, Joe, why don't you start us off? Give me a player and a landing spot that has you concerned.
Yeah, so the first player I'll talk about here is quarterback JJ McCarthy, and I would be concerned if he would get taken by the New York Giants. And that's because they're a team that's, shaky offensive line. They do have Dable right now. I feel like he's definitely not guaranteed to continue to be there as the head coach. Daniel Jones, Drew Lock. What are they going to do with those guys? Is JJ McCarthy even going to be a year one starter if he does go there? And then, I just worry about what happens next. If Dable gets fired, he's dealing with a new head coach. And then they have a shaky wide receiver room as well that, they haven't really been able to upgrade there. And then, they lose Saquon Barkley, so they got to figure something out in the running back room as well. So that would be my nightmare situation for JJ McCarthy.
Not to mention Darren Waller is possibly retiring as well.
Yeah,
so
that's up in there.
What weapons does McCarthy have? And like you said, I think Daboll in that front office is on thin ice. So if they end up getting the axe, then that's never good for a quarterback to start over with a new coaching staff.
Yeah, just not, we've seen this before. These rookie quarterbacks go into non-stable situations and it just never works out for them. And, look at it. You got Baker sticks out, several coaching changes there. And then he gets shipped off to Cleveland and finally got it right in Tampa.
So for me, we're going to be talking about Drake Maye. And I would think it's a nightmare situation if he goes to the New England Patriots. Now, it's very heavily rumored that he's going to go there. So this is very realistic that it may happen. But to me, he's sort of a project-type quarterback. He's going to have to develop. He's going to, in my view, have to have an offensive mastermind to really work with him, hone in on his skills, and kind of help his weaknesses. People might make the comparison to Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen benefited greatly because of the tutelage of Brian Daboll when he was there. Well, now he's going to a first-time head coach of Drake Maye, who I know a lot of people are excited about and feel have a lot of potential, but that's a big ask for someone who is a defensive-minded head coach. So I understand. I know you like Van Pelt as an offensive coordinator. I think he's done okay in the NFL, but my concern is he has no weapons. There's no receivers he could really work with, other than if you think Juju Smith-Schuster's relevant. He's got Ramondre Stevenson. The offensive line is kind of just okay at this point. And Hunter Henry at tight end. So, again, not a lot of weapons. Would they let Jacoby Brissett start initially? I actually think if he did go to New England, I wouldn't want to see the field pie for an entire year because I think it could be disastrous. So that's my nightmare situation for Drake Maye.
Yeah, I don't think you're in the minority with people not wanting these quarterbacks to go to New England, but in the reality, one of them's got to. And I think, Drake Maye definitely, like you said, I think he could benefit from just sitting behind Jacoby Brissett for a year, maybe even give the New England Patriots a year to kind of restock their roster. Maybe they get him some weapons by the time he is able to start in his second year. As much as dynasty owners aren't going to want to hear that, but it could just benefit him from a player to sit behind Brissett for 1 year. Continue to learn and then, get his shot in year two. So my second player, going to talk about running back Braelon Allen. I struggled to figure out a nightmare situation for this guy just because, I feel like different teams are going to view him as different ways. Like, I feel like he's built like an NFL running back. He's kind of built for that, to be that volume guy for somebody. But then I can also see teams viewing this guy as the next A.J. Dillon and a number 2 on running back on their roster. But I think it'd be a nightmare situation if he were to go to, I'm going to say the Los Angeles Rams, just because it seems like Sean McVay is comfortable in a one running back system where a lot of other teams like to have multiple backs. You saw Kyron Williams last year really shoulder the workload. A lot of people were excited for Zach Evans last year, being a rookie. He never really got a chance to see the field. So that's kind of why I had him going to the Rams as a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, for those who own Kyron Williams would definitely be shaking in their boots. Guy can't stay healthy. There's no guarantee that they would not bring in another running back. So it's definitely possible because he's a completely different style of back. So,
Right.
And that's the thing. People could say, well, how's that going to happen? Well, did you think that Zach Charbonnet was going to go to the Seattle Seahawks? I certainly didn't, with Kenneth Walker having as good of a year as he did.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I don't know where Braelon Allen's going to go either. Like, I feel like, he could be somewhere to be the 3rd to 4th round draft pick, depending on people view him. But maybe there's a team that really likes him and goes higher. I just don't know.
So next guy I'm going to be talking about is running back Jonathon Brooks. And my nightmare scenario for him is that he lands with the Washington Commanders. Commanders have 2 second-round picks early in the second round. More than likely, Brooks, they say, is going to be the first running back off the board. And so that means that he's in play, I think, in that early second round. Now, you may say, well, why would they do that? Well, the possibility that they might is Austin Eckler is there, but he's on a 1-year deal. Jonathon Brooks is coming back from ACL injury. They may say, hey, let's just redshirt this guy and have him play maybe towards the end of the year. And then you have Brian Robinson there. But you got to remember, this is not the same regime that drafted Brian Robinson. It's a new general manager. It's a new head coach. So they may not feel that Brian Robinson fits their offense. So if that's the case, it doesn't matter what Brian Robinson was before. They're starting with a clean slate. So then they bring in Jonathon Brooks. In a year from now, Eckler's no longer there. What's going on with Brian Robinson? I think it's a nightmare because, a guy who more than likely, if he goes to a great landing spot, sneaks at the back end of the first round. If he goes to Washington, I think for sure he's going to be a second-round pick in rookie drafts.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, people wouldn't necessarily view that as a bad thing just because, they do have Brian Robinson, but like you said, and Austin Eckler, but I just don't know what their long-term plans are. But even Chris Rodriguez looked pretty good for them last year as well. So my third guy, staying at the running back position, I'm going to talk about Blake Corum. And my nightmare situation for him would be if he gets taken by the Atlanta Falcons, who already have Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. They got a couple of third-round picks. This is a new coaching regime as well. I don't know how much they'll, like Tyler Algier, he wasn't a heavily involved guy. They lose Cordarrelle Patterson. I could see them maybe taking a flyer on a running back. And, Blake Corum, I think, is going to go somewhere in the 3rd round, being that they have 2 picks. They could take a flyer, but like I said, him going to where Bijan Robinson is, I feel like that would be the Seattle scenario of, Zach Charbonnet last year, people excited for him. Then he goes right behind Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, I think Bijan. I mean, the thing what's tough with them is Terry Fontenot, the general manager, is still there. But we have to remember the GM. His job is to work with the coaching staff to say, "Hey, what type of players fit your system and your schemes?" It's my job to evaluate the players and tell you which players are going to be best,
right,
in order for you to execute the way that you want to execute. So if he doesn't feel, if Raheem Morris or Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator, feels that they don't have something and that Blake Corum offers that, it's not out of the realm of impossibility that it happens.
Yeah.
So the next guy I'm going to be talking about is wide receiver Xavier Worthy, the speedster from the combine. Well, my nightmare scenario for him is he goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have a vacancy at wide receiver right now. George Pickens is the guy at this point. They've got not really a lot around him. They've got I'm trying to think what's his name, Joe. The name escapes me.
Calvin Austin.
I had Calvin, but I couldn't think of the guy. Calvin Austin, who they could possibly be using.
Their own speedster.
Their own speedster, right. But it's like you got the Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator who didn't really have a heavy passing game as it is. And I understand now Russ is the quarterback. Russ used to have a moon ball. Don't know if he has a moon ball anymore. So, I just don't like it. I don't think he's going to I wouldn't get enough targets. I don't think he'd get enough usage. They're going to rely heavily on the run game and the play action game. So if he went to Pittsburgh, I think he's a borderline back end 1st round pick. And I think he goes to Pittsburgh, he's dropping, he's dropping to the bottom of the second round for me. Even though I know Pittsburgh is a receiving factory, the direction of that team has me concerned for Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the one thing Russ still has is a moon ball. Is I think you saw him. Just throw it down the field to Cortland Sutton at times, and I think that's what he's going to do with George Pickens. Pickens finally gets a guy that can throw it down the field. It's really the intermediate stuff and over the middle stuff that Russell Wilson can't do. So if that's Xavier Worthy, another wide receiver's strength, then if they go to the Steelers, then he's not going to be as appealing. So for my next guy, I'm going with wide receiver Rome Odunze. And my nightmare scenario is that he goes to the Tennessee Titans with Will Levis at quarterback. They have Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins at the moment. But I just don't know if I believe in Will Levis being the guy going forward in terms of dynasty. We'll see how he does this year. But even so, obviously, I think DeAndre Hopkins will be only around for this year. But I just don't know if Will Levis can support all these weapons or who he can support. And at least I know Calvin Ridley will be there in the future. And then, Rome Odunze will kind of be there as well as the number 2 at that point. But I think I'd rather him go to a more stable situation with a more stable situation at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. Very well could go probably in the top 10. Rome Odunze will. And they've got Braelon Brooks too, which I think people have probably moved past him. I think his time has came and went at this point, it seems like,
unfortunately,
for relevancy in the National Football League. But when it comes to Odunze going to the Titans, I agree. First year is not going to go well. But DeAndre Hopkins, I think he's on a 1-year deal, or they'll probably get out of it otherwise. So he'll step in, but then it's Ridley, but they can Will Levis support him. So, yeah, I agree with you. That definitely would be a nightmare scenario. So the next guy I'm going to be talking about is wide receiver Adonai Mitchell. And interestingly enough, our guest, Brian Ford, came on and talked about we talked about our best landing spots, if you haven't checked that out. So just so happens I'm going to give his best, but I think it's a nightmare scenario, which is him going to the Baltimore Ravens. I understand they may have a need for it, but the problem is that offense has never been designed to give receivers a lot of volume. They've got Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely in the middle. They just brought in Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, they're going to pound the rock with Derrick Henry, and they've got Lamar Jackson. So if Adonai Mitchell goes there, Zay Flowers was okay. He didn't, take the world by storm when he came there. So can Lamar Jackson and that offense support Adonai Mitchell and Zay Flowers? I don't think so. So if he goes there, I remember I'm reminiscent back when I was really excited about Rashad Bateman, and Bateman went to Baltimore, and he just, he's become irrelevant. Even though if you look at his metrics, he creates a ton of separation, he just never gets involved in the game. So I think it's a nightmare scenario if Mitchell goes to the Ravens.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And one thing for Bateman is that injuries haven't helped his situation, and his availability hasn't been the best. But I feel like every year we get excited when a rookie wide receiver goes to the Baltimore Ravens, just because they've just never had the stud guys on the outside, and there's always room in that wide receiver room, and you're always so excited. All right, this is these guys are going to get peppered with targets. They need a wide receiver. Now they got them, and then it just never seems to pan out, like you said with Bateman. I do think having a guy like Adonai Mitchell around would help Zay Flowers because, he's not really meant to be an outside receiver and get it peppered with a whole bunch of targets. So I think he needs somebody else to take some coverage away and allow him to kind of eat in the middle of the field and get those big, long plays. But I could definitely see that as a nightmare for Mitchell, though. So my last player I'm going to talk about is wide receiver Ladd McConkey. And my nightmare situation for him is if he went to the Minnesota Vikings. And that's might find it surprising because Minnesota Vikings are a really good offense, but I'd just be concerned. They already got Jordan Addison there, and I'm assuming they're going to get something done with Justin Jefferson, pay him up, get him the extension. They got TJ Hawkinson at tight end as well. And we're not sure who the quarterback's going to be, who they're going to draft here. They do have Sam Darnold for the time being. But most people see Ladd McConkey being that Z receiver. I just don't know. It's one thing if it was still Kirk Cousins to be able to support multiple receiving weapons. I just don't know if a rookie quarterback or young quarterback is going to be able to do that if McConkey goes there.
Well, not to mention, I'm pretty sure KJ Osborne is no longer on the team.
Right, yeah.
And he was involved with the Vikings, a decent bit. So as a result, they have a void there. So it's not crazy to think. And can they sign Jefferson long-term? If they can, why wouldn't they draft a receiver to replace him? But then who's throwing them the ball?
You're right, yeah. That's like I said, I'm operating under the assumption they get something with Jefferson done. But there is a world where he'd prefer to go elsewhere and maybe doesn't want to re-sign with the Vikings.
All right, so my last player that's in a nightmare scenario that I'd be pretty concerned about is tight end Brock Bowers going to the Seattle Seahawks. Going back to those Seahawks. But it's possible that he's available in the middle of the round. We know that Mike McDonald was involved in that Baltimore system. I understand he was on the defense side of the ball, but you saw a heavy utilization of the tight end. You already have Noah Fant there, but Noah Fant isn't a guy that is going to say, well, we can't take a tight end. They lost Colby Parkinson, who was a great blocking tight end. So they bring in Bowers. I think Bowers would block a lot, but then on top of that, would he actually get the action, the volume, and the targets that we're hoping for? They got DK. They got JSN. They've got Lockett. Lockett's only going to be there for a year. Is Geno the quarterback going forward? Who's going to be the quarterback? Sam Howell. So I could see Bowers, especially if they go best player available, Seattle Seahawks take him. And I think that would be a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, it definitely could be. Whoever takes Bowers, I can't imagine they're going to ask him to block a whole lot just because of how much of an offensive weapon this guy actually is. But, you did mention they lose Parkinson. They also lost Will Dissly as well. He had some utilization in that offense, but I definitely agree with you, especially, the instability at quarterback as well. Geno's there. I'm assuming he's going to play out the 1 year here with them. And then do they keep Sam Howell around or do they go elsewhere? So I think for the reasons you mentioned in the quarterback instability it would be a nightmare situation.
So that does it for our top 10 nightmare rookie landing spots for Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you haven't checked it out yet, go ahead and check out our best. It's not all about negative here. We talk about the positive too. We talked about the best rookie landing spots for quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, and IDPs. Go ahead and check that out. And if this is the first time you've happened to see us, then thanks for joining, and we ask if you could please subscribe to our channel. We just passed 500 on YouTube. We're looking to get over to 1,000. That's our new goal. We'd be very grateful if you could support our channel. Next week we're going to be talking about rookie rankings. We're going to give you our quarterbacks, IDP. We got a couple guests coming. You're not going to want to miss out on that. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.